Welcome to the Clinical Pen. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and you can always find more at clinicalpen.com.
Great to be here.
Okay, so today let's discuss something that's, well, it's pretty much always on parents' minds, right? How to keep our kids healthy.
Oh, definitely. How to keep those, sniffles and bugs maybe a little bit at bay.
Exactly. And there's just so much information out there. You hear about home remedies, different tips. You see those immunity shots in the store aisles. It's hard to know what's actually helpful.
It really is. It feels like you're trying to navigate this huge sea of advice and, figuring out what truly makes a difference. That can feel, well, pretty overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah, it really can. So our aim today is to try and cut through some of that noise. We want to look at the core ideas behind supporting your child's immune health and really unpack what matters most.
Sounds good. And I
Okay.
think, to really do that, we have to start with the basics. Like, what is the immune system?
Right, the fundamentals.
Yeah. Essentially, think of it as your body's own natural defense force. It's incredibly complex, designed to protect you from invaders, things like bacteria, viruses, other germs.
And it's not just one single thing, is it? It's a whole system working together.
Exactly. It uses specialized cells like white blood cells and things called antibodies. They're constantly patrolling, looking for threats. And then you have organs involved too, like lymph nodes and the spleen, sort of like command centers where immune cells can gather and coordinate.
It's a pretty sophisticated operation happening inside us all the time.
It really is. But here's where it gets particularly interesting when we talk about kids.
Okay.
Well, that amazing defense system, it isn't fully developed right from the start. A child's immune system is still, learning and growing. It's developing.
Ah, so that's a big reason why younger kids seem to catch, well, almost everything that goes around.
That's a key part of it, yes. They're still building up their defenses, their sort of internal library of germs they've encountered.
Like they're still writing their defense playbook.
That's a great way to put it. And, every time they get sick with something relatively mild, like a cold from daycare or maybe a little tummy bug, their immune system is actually learning.
So it's not just fighting it off, it's studying it.
Precisely.
Mm-hmm.
It figures out how to recognize that specific germ, how to fight it effectively, and this is crucial, it creates a memory. So if it sees that same germ again later, it can respond much faster and stronger.
Okay, so those coughs and sniffles that we as parents often dread are actually kind of like essential training sessions.
In a very real way, yes. They are part of how a child develops what we call acquired immunity. Now, they do get some initial immunity, passively, passed across the placenta before birth.
Ah, right, a little head start.
Well, a head start, exactly.
Mhm.
But the really robust, long-lasting immunity, that mostly develops through actually encountering illnesses in their environment.
Just day-to-day life.
Yeah, those natural exposures. Or, and this is really important, through vaccinations. Vaccinations are like a controlled, safe way to teach the immune system. They introduce a harmless version or maybe just a piece of a germ, so the body learns to fight it off without the child having to go through the actual illness. It's strategic learning, if you like.
That makes a lot of sense. The immune system is really this dynamic learning machine. It gets stronger through experience, both natural and guided, like with vaccines.
Perfectly put.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. What about those products you see everywhere now, the immunity shots? Little bottles, often packed with things like ginger, turmeric, echinacea, maybe high-dose vitamin C or citrus. The big question is, based on what we know, do these actually work, especially for kids?
Yeah, that's a huge question parents have. The information we have suggests that, well, these shots contain ingredients people think might help the immune system.
Things traditionally associated with health.
Exactly. But the actual scientific evidence, especially for some of the common things like, say, high-dose vitamin C or zinc in this specific context of a shot, it isn't nearly as strong as maybe the marketing suggests.
So the claims might be running a bit ahead of the science.
For a lot of these specific products and how they're used, yes, that seems to be the case. And a really key thing to grasp here is that these are generally sold as dietary supplements.
Not as medicines.
Correct. They don't go through the same kind of rigorous testing for safety and effectiveness that actual medicines do. And critically, they aren't specifically designed or tested for children.
That seems like a really important point, the lack of testing specifically in children. Could they actually be, risky or even harmful for younger kids?
Well, the available information suggests being cautious. For very young children especially, these really concentrated formulas might potentially carry more risks than benefits.
Like what kind of risk?
Their digestive systems are still developing, they're more sensitive. So these strong, sometimes quite spicy or acidic ingredients could potentially cause stomach upset. There's also a theoretical concern they could interfere with how kids absorb other important nutrients from their food.
Okay. And what if a child is already sick? Say they've got a cold. Does taking one of these shots help them get better faster?
Based on the current evidence, there really isn't solid proof that these specific shots or supplements significantly shorten how long a child is sick,
Right.
or make the illness less severe once it's already started.
Yes. Yeah, that's a critical distinction for parents, isn't it? So if relying on these shots isn't really the proven way forward, where should parents be putting their energy when it comes to immune health?
The core message that comes through is that the focus probably shouldn't be on finding some kind of magic bullet supplement.
Right.
Instead, the energy is much better spent on giving the immune system the basic, fundamental support it needs to work well every single day.
Which means,
It means focusing on things like consistent, healthy nutrition, making sure they get enough sleep, encouraging regular physical activity, and just generally fostering good health habits. That's really the foundation.
and I guess it goes without saying, but if you are thinking about giving your child any kind of supplement or you have concerns,
Oh, absolutely. You should always talk to your child's doctor or pediatrician first. The material we looked at even uses pregnant individuals needing medical advice before taking supplements as an example, just highlighting that professional guidance is key, especially for kids.
yeah, that consultation is vital. Your pediatrician knows your child's history and specific needs.
Exactly. They're the best resource.
Okay, let's tackle some of those really common questions parents ask. Things like, can kids build up immunity to poison ivy? Or cat allergies? What about mosquito bites? Do you get used to them? What does the science actually say?
Yeah, these are great practical questions. And the answers are kind of interesting because it's not the same for everything. Immunity or maybe just reduced reaction works differently depending on what we're talking about.
Okay, let's break it down. Poison ivy first. If your kid seems to get it all the time, do they eventually stop reacting?
With poison ivy, getting it repeatedly might sometimes lead to a less severe reaction for some people over time. The body's response might calm down a bit. Might, exactly.
Sure.
But the information's clear. It doesn't make you truly immune. You can definitely still react. It just maybe won't be quite as bad for some individuals after many exposures.
Got it. Okay, what about allergies? Like to cats? Can kids sort of grow out of a cat allergy or get less sensitive if they live with a cat?
Cat allergies are a bit different. For some kids, yes, their sensitivity can decrease over time, especially with ongoing exposure, like living with the animal.
Hmm.
The immune system sometimes adapts.
Hmm.
And for allergies that are more persistent or severe, there's allergy shots immunotherapy. That's where they carefully introduce tiny amounts of the allergen to sort of retrain the immune system not to overreact, and that can be quite effective.
So that's actively teaching the immune system. Interesting. Okay, mosquito bites. If you get bitten constantly, do you eventually just stop itching?
Ah, the dream. But unfortunately, no. The information suggests your reaction to mosquito bites, the itchiness, the swelling tends to stay pretty consistent no matter how often you're bitten. It's a reaction to the mosquito saliva, and your body just keeps recognizing it as foreign.
Okay, so no luck there. What about common viruses like stomach bugs, norovirus, maybe salmonella? If you get sick once, are you protected after that?
Generally, for many of those common bugs, the immunity you get after an infection is often pretty short-lived.
Ah.
Yeah, you can definitely get infected again later with the same type of germ or maybe a slightly different strain. And we even see this with newer viruses like COVID-19, right? Immunity from infection or even vaccination can fade over time, which is why boosters might be needed. It really shows that immunity isn't always a permanent, one-and-done thing.
That's a really important point. Immunity is dynamic, it's specific, and it can change over time. Okay, let's pull out some key biological takeaways about the immune system itself that came up. Maybe 3 main things parents should know.
Sure. The first one kind of reinforces what we talked about earlier. Your child's immune system learns and gets stronger through exposure.
Those training sessions.
Yeah, exactly. Those mild illnesses aren't just things to get through. They're active learning experiences. The body is literally building a database of germs it knows how to fight.
So it's not just being sick, it's actually development. What's the second takeaway?
The second point is that hormonal changes can temporarily affect how the immune system works.
Hormones. How so?
Well, the material mentions examples like during pregnancy or even the menstrual cycle in adults. Now, obviously, young kids aren't dealing with those specific hormonal shifts, but it illustrates a broader point. The immune system's activity level isn't always constant. Hormones can influence the production or activity of certain immune cells, sometimes making the system slightly less active, sometimes altering its function temporarily. It just shows how interconnected everything in the body is.
That is fascinating. You don't always link hormones and general immunity together like that. And the third key point.
The third one is that aging affects the immune system. It becomes less effective as we get older.
Right, you hear about that more with seniors.
Exactly. But the relevance here is that it really underlines why building a strong foundation for immune health early in life is so important. You're essentially setting up a more resilient system for the long run. As people age, the body tends to make fewer new immune cells, and the ones they have might not be as quick to recognize threats or remember past ones. So starting strong really matters.
It absolutely frames early childhood health as this vital investment in their future, doesn't it? We've talked about how the immune system works, we've looked at supplements, cleared up some common questions, touched on these biological basics. What does this all boil down to for parents in practical terms? What are the best steps to take?
Well, the guidance is actually quite consistent and, maybe reassuringly, it brings us right back to the fundamentals of health. The most powerful way to support your child's immune system isn't complicated. It's about focusing on the core habits.
Okay, so what are those key building blocks again?
Top of the list is a varied, nutritious diet. Lots of different fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean protein, getting a wide range of nutrients naturally from food.
Not just zeroing in on one vitamin.
Exactly. Then adequate sleep, super important. Sleep is when the body, including the immune system, does a lot of its repair and regeneration work. Regular physical activity is also key. It helps immune cells circulate and function well.
Get them moving.
Yep. Managing stress is important too, even for kids. Chronic stress can dampen the immune response. Then there's following the recommended vaccination schedule. That's one of the most effective ways we have to build specific immunity against serious diseases.
Right. Targeted protection.
And finally, don't underestimate simple hygiene. Things like regular hand washing are incredibly effective at just preventing germs from getting in the first place. Less work for the immune system.
So it sounds like these basic lifestyle things, food, sleep, exercise, hygiene, vaccines, they're really the powerhouse for supporting immunity.
That's absolutely the message. The material's pretty clear. Immunity shots, supplements. They exist, and maybe in very specific situations under a doctor's advice they could have a role, but they absolutely do not replace these foundational health habits.
You can't supplement your way around not enough sleep or a poor diet.
Precisely.
And just to reiterate that point, if you're unsure about any supplement or medicine for your child, talk to your pediatrician.
Always. They're your partner in making the best decisions for your child's health.
So wrapping this up then, what's the main takeaway for you, the parent listening? It seems to be that your child's immune system is actually pretty amazing. It's capable, it's flexible, and it's actively learning all the time.
Yeah, it really is. And the most effective way you can help it, based on everything we've looked at, isn't really about finding quick fixes or the latest trendy product.
It's the daily grind in a good way.
Kind of. It's focusing on those consistent daily patterns. Good food, enough sleep, plenty of movement, and, sensible hygiene and getting those recommended vaccinations.
It almost simplifies things, focusing back on that consistent care rather than, complicated potion.
It does. And here's a really interesting point about what having a strong immune system actually means. It doesn't guarantee your child will never get sick. That's just not realistic, right?
Now, kids get sick.
Kids get sick. But what it does mean, and what the evidence points towards, is that when they do encounter germs and get ill, their body is better equipped. It has the strength, maybe the memory, the resilience to cope better.
So they might recover faster, or maybe the illness won't be as severe.
Exactly. That resilience, that ability to bounce back effectively, that's the real goal.
That's the long game for their health.
It really is. It's about building a body that can handle the challenges life throws at it.
So here's maybe a final thought to leave you with. We've talked about how mild illnesses actually help the immune system learn. In our world today, we often try really hard to avoid any germ exposure. Constant hand sanitizer, maybe keeping kids away from minor sniffles.
Yeah, the bubble effect sometimes.
Yeah, right. How do we balance that understandable desire to protect them with the immune system's need for that natural learning process, that exposure that builds strength? It's a tricky balance, isn't it? Something to think about as you go about your day with your little one.
It's definitely a modern parenting challenge, a real balancing act.
Well, thanks so much for joining us for this discussion today.